In June of 2019, Nintendo blessed us with this amazing trailer. Just take a look. This is one of the absolute most exciting times of all history to be a Zelda fan. It's at the end of the trailer here where we see one of the most intriguing things about this entire new game. We see Hyrule Castle being lifted into the sky. When Nintendo showed us the first trailer in 2022, it wasn't just Hyrule Castle that was in the sky, it looked like the entire adventure would take place in the sky. It was like if we were about to get Skyward Sword, but its potential fully realized. And to top it all off, it was going to be a sequel to one of the greatest video games ever made, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. So the question has to be asked now, where did it go wrong? I genuinely believe that The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom is one of the greatest video games ever made. It was even a contender for the 2023 Game of the Year award, one of the greatest years in the history of gaming. And for some reason, it doesn't even hit my top 5 favorite games. I'm not even sure if it reaches my top 10 or top 20. I will boldly say that the first problem that Tears of the Kingdom had going against it was that it was a sequel to Breath of the Wild, one of the greatest games ever made. There have only been a few Zelda games in history that have been sequels to a previous game. We have Zelda 2, Link's Awakening, and the Oracle games. We have Majora's Mask, Phantom Hourglass, and then finally, Tears of the Kingdom. Zelda 2 reimagined the landscape of Hyrule. It was a completely different game than The Legend of Zelda 1. Link's Awakening took us to Koholint, the illusory island in Link's dreams. The Oracle games also took us to 2 different magical worlds. And my beloved Majora's Mask taking us to the beautifully dark Termina. And of course Phantom Hourglass taking us to an endless expanse of sea. You might be beginning to see where I'm getting at with where Tears of the Kingdom went wrong. What all of the other Zelda sequels have in common that Tears of the Kingdom just doesn't have is a new world to explore. When people first started playing Breath of the Wild, it was like stepping into a new world. It was the biggest version of Hyrule that we had ever seen. Every mountain to climb, every river to cross, every cave to explore.
I want to be the first one to see them all.
The game designers painstakingly made it so that every area would be interesting to explore. You'd see a mountain in the distance and you'd say, I want to climb that mountain.
How much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over the mountains?
And when you finally finished exploring every nook's cranny in the land, it was time to face your foe, Calamity Ganon, in an epic battle that saved the world. Or so it seemed. At the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom, a terrible event known as the Upheaval occurred, lifting parts of Hyrule into the sky and causing the Princess Zelda to vanish without a trace. If you watch all the trailers, it will show Link exploring sky islands, jumping off of them, diving into ponds, exploring caves. It was so mind-blowing to think about what this all meant. And after the prologue of the Great Sky Island, it was all downhill from there as far as the world is concerned. That is the only sky island in the game that is that big. The rest of them are either simply used to get to a dungeon, repeats of themselves, or small plot devices that would take about 20 minutes to get through, if even that. When you get to the surface below, you find that pretty much nothing has changed except there's a few giant holes in the ground where there was nothing before. And there's really cool caves to explore all over the face of the land. Those giant holes lead to the depths, which at first glance is this intimidating, mysterious world that ends up being pretty much nothing. The only thing that there is to do in the depths is light the depths up and collect some special items from past Zelda games. There's one major side quest down there and one dungeon that you can access through the surface. What started as intimidating and mysterious quickly becomes tedious and empty. And the trailers were extremely misleading on how much time you were going to spend in the sky versus the caves. In Breath of the Wild, the shrines were used as a way to strengthen your character and as a way to explore the world. It gave you purpose. In Tears of the Kingdom, the shrines are used to strengthen your character and get this stupid piece of armor that's not even worth upgrading. Yes, I'm bitter about it because it took me 160 hours to get this piece of crap, and it looks ugly, and it took more resources than I'd ever found in the 160 hours that I was playing the game.
I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
A Link Between Worlds made way better use of a map that was used in a previous Zelda game. Half of the game was still spent in the same world as A Link to the Past, but you got to explore it in a fundamentally different way. Lorule was also a fantastic addition to the Zelda lore, where the depths and the Sky Islands are just kind of set pieces. Look, I'm done complaining about it because it's just going to make me angrier. I just want to talk about what I would have done to make it better. One of my absolute favorite Zelda games is Wind Waker. I loved sailing between the islands and the fact that every island had its own unique culture and people. The islands were fun to explore, there were mysterious things all around, and the landscape of each island itself told a story about the inhabitants who lived there. In Tears of the Kingdom, every single Sky Island is just a repeat of the other Sky Islands as far as culture, technology, and history are concerned. You don't learn anything new about the Zonai by exploring these islands. And it seems that the Zonai were the only species living up here. How fascinating. Even Breath of the Wild's landscape made far better use of teaching us about the Zonai. Hundreds of theory videos exist just about who the Zonai were. I made a theory video about who the Zonai were, and I was dead wrong, because the truth was just boring. They're just goat people with magical technology. I know I said I'd stop complaining. Just talking about this game riles me up in a way that it shouldn't. So my proposal to fixing Tears of the Kingdom's world is to change all of it. Instead of having a few dozen Sky Islands all around that look pretty much the same as each other, have hundreds of them. You see where there were rivers dividing the lands in Breath of the Wild? Make that sky. Make the upheaval far more drastic than what was set up in the game. Make it so drastic that the surface of Hyrule is barely recognizable. Or even make the game take place so far above Hyrule that the land below is just not accessible at all. Make it so that the Sky Islands are the Hyrule that we used to know, but different. They are up in the sky now, things have changed, their locations have changed, people have to build new cities to make things work. Just make it different. If you want to keep the depths, put it on the surface and make it so that it's covered in a shroud of darkness that the light roots then cleanse every time you find one. And now that you have your world set as the Sky Islands instead of Hyrule, it already feels like a sequel rather than a DLC. Another thing that you could do to make exploring the Sky Islands just as interesting as exploring Hyrule was in Breath of the Wild is make it so that it's so far in the future that society has begun to build on those islands. Make it so that the upheaval is a cataclysmic event that changes everything, the way of life that everyone has. Zora's domain has been lifted into the sky, and now the people there have to deal with that. They have to build a new city to accommodate how much different everything looks. Maybe Death Mountain has been left on the surface, but now it's covered in molten lava, so the Gorons had to leave it in order to find a new home. Some other places that could have been left on our new depths or the surface could have been like Hateno Village, Lurelin Village, Terrytown. There's so many different options that you could say, we're left here, but now life is hard because everything is dark and you need to light it up for them. It gives you a personal plot reason to actually do these things instead of saying, I'm going to go find all the light routes. You're exploring a new world. Skyrule. Another good thing about setting into the future is that Ganondorf can have more of a presence in this story. It doesn't feel like the Hyruleans have been inconvenienced for a few days or weeks at most. And then Ganondorf's presence doesn't have to be secret. It can be overt. It can be over the whole world. It's your job to fix what happened, or even to see if it's even worth fixing. Is life in the sky better than it was on the surface? It gives you a moral responsibility to the plot. This all fixes how boring the Sky Islands become after so much time. I can't tell you how many times I saw the same exact Sky Island. It was just annoying at some point. You're trying to find something cool and new, and it's like, oh look, that island again. I swear I've been here. No, I haven't? Oh. So the Zonai were just really boring architects. You can build a Sky Island and this is what you make with it. Really? And it takes that problem away if you make it a few years in the future, because then other races live up there now. They've built new cities, so you're exploring it, and it's like, well, this is actually really cool. This is really interesting. I'm having a good time coming to terms with what this world is. The shrines then have a purpose again, like they did in Breath of the Wild, to explore, not just make yourself more powerful, but to discover this new land of Skyrule, as I'm calling it now. Oh, and with this new Skyrule, you should make it so that the islands are a lot closer together, because that was also annoying, is you just take a hover bike, get to an island, explore that same little island, hop on your hover bike again, and do the same thing. If it wasn't for the hover bike, exploring the Sky Islands would have been miserable, because you would just be exploring the same thing over and over and over again, and it would have been very difficult to get to each one. I know that a lot of people say that the hover bike ruined aspects of the game, but in reality it would have been awful going to every single island when they're all the same. So at least the hover bike removed some of that tedium from making fantastic machines that only last a short time in order to get to islands that all look the same. I can't keep going over this point. It's just so boring. And one of the most important things you can do with these closer Sky Islands to make it feel more like a society, it also makes it feel like a more fantastic world. And you can also make it so that the Zonai are far more interesting to learn about, because maybe instead of finding just hints of ruins of the Zonai, you find entire abandoned cities, ghost towns, that you can then look at and say, wow, this must have been a fascinating race of people, instead of going through cutscenes and saying, wow, that's just a goat man. That's it. No more theory videos about the Zonai. And most importantly of all, make it so that the Sky Islands are massive. Make it so that they're as big as the Great Sky Island. Make it so that every single one of them is at least that big and close enough together that getting to each one is not like this challenging ordeal. But falling below into the depths is like a big deal, because getting back up is just as interesting as getting back down there. So you could have reshaped all of Hyrule, you could have had it take a few years, and you could have had it so that people settled up in the sky so that there's actually people to talk to up there, except for a couple of constructs. I could go on about this for hours, but this is one of the major things that I would have done to fix Tears of the Kingdom. To make it a game that I want to play again, instead of being one that I'm like, glad it's over. I've never felt that way about a Zelda game except for Skyward Sword when it first came out. And I never want to feel like that again with a Zelda game. So that's it. Subscribe if you want to hear more about my rants about Tears of the Kingdom. I have a lot of ideas for what could have made it a better game, specifically some story ideas. Or some other video game or movie hot takes. There's a lot more coming.